So we are rolling into part 2 of this video series of disassembling my transmission on my 2004 Subaru Outback. We've already removed the exhaust in a previous video. The first step to the next step, which would be getting the drive axle out, is removing the heat shield, which would normally be right here. It runs from here up to where the transmission mount is. And it's got all these little stud bolts. They've got 12mm nuts on them. And you can just go at them with a 12mm socket and ratchet, wrench, whatever you want. I ended up using a deep well 12mm socket and impact. Much faster, pretty quick and easy. There are 4 of them back here. There are your first 2, your second 2, and then up here you're going to have one right there, and that, and then another one right here, and that will drop the heat shield down. It's usually a good idea. Don't damage the heat shield. You should put it back in when you reinstall all of this, and it's not technically necessary, but it does help with a lot of heat dissipation and protecting your drive shaft from overheating. It also protects any play in your drive shaft from interacting with your exhaust. If your exhaust starts getting bouncy for some reason, maybe you have a broken joint on it, or the engine's got a lot of kick from bad engine mounts, always good to put the heat shield back on. If you really feel the need to remove your heat shield, you might be installing an aftermarket exhaust system. You can use heat tape wrap for your exhaust to contain the heat and not apply undue heat to your drive shaft or the bottom side of your car. As well, it would be advised to either have a machine shop reorient your exhaust to sit a little bit lower away from the drive shaft, because this guy does have some play. It is able to flex around a little bit, and your exhaust will do the same. You really want to have that extra protection between the drive shaft and the exhaust itself. So that's how you get the heat shield out. Next, we are going to be taking the drive shaft out. We start at the end, down by the rear differential. I have got myself a standard 12mm wrench. So down here at the drive shaft itself, there is the rear differential mount. I've actually got it up on a bottle jack right now. The front of the car is up on jack stands. Probably should be on jack stands in the back, but I don't have 2 more jack stands, and the store was sold out. So continuing on, we've got the drive shaft here. And what you're going to see is there's going to be a bolt head, 4 of them, around this. And it goes in that way. Backside is a nut. They're both 12mm. The bolt heads should lock in place because they aren't able to rotate past this. So you should only have to undo the nut. You shouldn't have to use 2 wrenches to hold one side and loosen the other. You should just be able to break these free. And you're going to want, if you're doing this just for the drive shaft, and you're going as far as I am, the transmission, everything, you only need to jack up the back of the car. You need your tires, your rear tires, to be off the ground, because you are going to need to, as I did, go at these 2, get them out, and I can reach this one and get it, but the one on the other side is a little bit too high out of the way to get at. So what I'm going to end up doing is, when I get to that one, I'm going to come to the wheel, and I am going to rotate the wheel a little bit, and that is going to rotate the drive shaft. And that is how you get access to all 4 of them. So I'm going to finish taking that out. So I did get that last one out. As you can see, though, I left it in. It's loose and it's ready to come out. But I'm leaving it in to support the drive shaft. When I go and take out the support for the center carrier bearing, I don't want to just drop this on myself. So this will give me something to at least have it supported. This one, actually, someone has removed this prior to my ownership of it, and you can see that the head a little stripped out. So it was able to freely rotate, so I did end up having to use two 12mm wrenches, hold, and twist the other side. Something that makes this much easier, so you don't have to support the rotation of the drive shaft at the same time. You do two on the bottom, get them out, undo your e-brake, rotate it to have the two that are still in down, put the e-brake back on, and that'll keep the drive shaft from freely spinning while you're trying to crank on it. Otherwise, you got to jam something up in here to keep it from rotating. Even if you jam up one of your tires, you'd have to do both of them to keep the diff from allowing the drive shaft to rotate. So after that, it's a quick recap. 12mm nut, 12mm bolt, 4 of them in the end of the drive shaft. We come up to the carrier bearing in the center of the car. There she is. That's what she looks like. If you are driving your Subaru and you go from a stop to going and you kind of hear a little thump or a little kick in the center of the car, if you've got a manual, you might feel it in the stick a little bit. As well, it should sound and kind of feel like it's coming from just behind your center console. Your center console, on these Outbacks at least, sits right about here. What is happening is your bearing has too much play and is worn out, and it's allowing this to kick around and throw those vibrations into the supports, into the frame, just behind the center console. And it's pretty reproducible. Just stop and then start going with a little bit of effort. Give it a nice jolt kick to going, like dropping the clutch or just stepping on the gas in an automatic. And you should be able to hear that thump, thump, thump. And that just means that this guy is shot. I've replaced one of these before. You don't replace the bearing. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. You just replace the whole drive shaft. You go to junkyard, get a used good drive shaft for, what did I spend? $80, I think. You need to make sure that you get the right, 1, generation, 2, split of the generation. For example, in this 2004 Outback, there's a different drive shaft for the 2003 and 2004 than for the 2000, 01, and 02. They're slightly different. The way the center bearing plays out is different. So you need to make sure you get the right one, and the automatics are different than the manuals, obviously. So this is a 14mm bolt. There's one on each side. We'll just undo those, and it'll drop the drive shaft down. And then I'll go and undo that last nut I've got down there at the end, and I'll be able to set the drive shaft on the ground. And it will just pull out of the back of the transmission housing. So I'm going to do that real quick. And there we go. Drive shaft is out. There that bad boy is. It required a decent amount of leveraging pull. I actually just braced my feet off the back of this bracket here and pulled at the carrier bearing itself. The drive shaft has, I'll show you in a second, the collar that sits inside of here. Let me get a better view of this. Drive shaft has a collar that sits inside of here and actually seals against this, because this actually has gear oil from the transmission that lubricates it. So it's got a decent seal on it. To pull it apart took a little bit of effort, but I got it. You don't need to drain your fluid to do this, but if you're not quick about your replacement, this will keep dripping fluid out. So if you're just replacing the drive shaft, you get to that point, take your new drive shaft, slide it in, and it'll come to your carrier bearing. I just put these there to keep them so I don't lose them. You put your carrier bearing up, get these threaded in, and don't tighten them down just yet. Get them finger tight. We come to the back where your differential is. You'll line your plate on the back of your drive shaft up. Get your nuts in. You want to just get them all finger tight and set, and then you want to come back to the carrier bearing, torque these down, and then come back to your rear diff bolts and torque those down. Make sure you haven't lost the lock washers for these. Those are necessary. This is not something you want to lose nuts or bolts on. It could be a good idea to replace that hardware too if it's really rusted and worn out. As well, if you're heading for work on the rear differential, that's the next step from here. You've got the exhaust off, you've got the drive shaft off. Next, if you're taking it out all the way, you'd be taking this bracket out. It's not something I'm working on right now, but yeah, that's what it looks like. And so you can see drive shaft itself. There she be. There's the input to the transmission, carrier bearing, bushing connection, and back to the drive shaft. So one way to tell the generational difference between like the generational split for this generation itself, this bushing joint on this 03 and 04 is a rubber bushing joint. That's just a straight conical joint. On one of the 2000s that I did, it's actually another wishbone joint. So it's just like these guys. So I'll give it the ability to play here, have some movement back and forth, keeps it fixed. So that's one key way to tell the difference between them. Especially if you're going to a junkyard, they may not know exactly what it's from. They might just say it's from that generation. But it's a good idea to get the exact one for your car. And these drive shafts are all basically the same from the Subarus, 90s up through the 2010s. And, you know, after that they get a little more complicated with how they've done the exhaust system and everything. But that's pretty much it for getting your drive shaft out. I'm going to keep working on this project. I'm heading for taking the transmission out. And next on the docket would be getting the transmission support plate undone. And then taking the bell housing bolts out. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Drop me a comment, questions. If I missed something that you really want to see, hit me up quickly, preferably. I'm hoping to have this done in the next week or so. Get it back in. There may be a install video, but if I don't really have any requests for install video, pretty much everything I'm doing is just reverse order, one step at a time. Thanks for watching.